Hi, and welcome to another edition of Probeline. I'd like to start off by thanking the Thrift Shop of Aspen for its 15 years of support for this program, but also to note that this is not the year that they can support us. As you probably know, the thrift shop is closed, say that 3 times fast, due to COVID. So they are not in a position to support us for this year, and we're hoping that you might be willing to help us bring you this program. So if you can make a donation to GrassRootsTV.org, it'd be greatly appreciated. Probeline is a show that helps you get to know candidates for public office better. And today we're going to be talking to Greg Poschman, who is running for his, inexplicably running for his second term as a county commissioner and unopposed. So let's take a few minutes to get to know Greg better. Hi, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Reid. It's great to meet you finally. Your reputation precedes you.
And you came anyway.
I came anyway, yeah. I walked into it.
Right. Eyes open. So we were, you are running unopposed
That's right.
for your second term.
Right.
And, you know, the obvious question first is why? What was exciting about being a commissioner the first time that made you do it again?
Okay, first question was why. You know, it's interesting. it's become my routine and my habit. So I did think seriously about running again or not running again. But honestly, quite honestly, when it was pretty much clinched for me when nobody rose up to challenge me. And you can take 2 messages from that. And one is, well, maybe I'm doing a good job, and honestly, a lot of people tell me I have been, so I'm grateful to them for that. But on the other hand, I'm a little bit upset because I think complacency could be part of that too. You know, we live in a community that's so busy now, maybe they don't have time for politics, or I don't think of it as politics, it's just leadership. You know, being an elected official, you know, maybe people just don't feel if they have the time to do it. So part of me was, I confess, the first thought was, well, what do they know that I don't? And now that we've gone into, you know, pretty much easy street the last 4 years in terms of county great, you know, budget, no major problems, all of the usual issues, but nothing that isn't, you know, insurmountable. And now all of a sudden we have a pandemic, an economic fallout following that pandemic that will spread throughout the entire community. You know, as far to parachute, you know, when we realize that our community now extends into the North Fork Valley to Hotchkiss, where a lot of our food comes from, our fresh local food, and to parachute or beyond, where a lot of our workforce comes from. You know, we've actually got some interesting challenges ahead, and I find surprised at myself for wanting to take it on, but here I am, you know, may as well go for it again. So that's why I'm back. No great ambitions to make any great changes, but I'm sure things will come up, and I'm looking forward to it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And this concludes our interview.
Yeah, thank you.
No, well, let me get a little, we don't know each other,
Right.
and I'm curious about your story of how you came here,
Right.
your history in the Valley. You know, you're very aware of how it's changing.
I was describing to you earlier that I'm a fatalist, and so I can tell you quite honestly, frankly, that I had no choice when I came here because I was born here. And my parents were early skiers in the early days of skiing. My father was an early advocate in the 1930s in the San Diego Ski Club. And when World War II broke out and we entered the war, he immediately began his effort to join the 10th Mountain Division, which he did, the ski troops. And he became a ski instructor at Camp Hale because he knew how to ski already. He was a bit older than most of the recruits. And so he taught generals and privates alike how to ski at Camp Hale. And then he was a sergeant and a leader of a machine gun squad in Italy, and he went through the major horrendous battles in Italy with a squad. And my mom was living in Denver and going to CU in Boulder, and she discovered she didn't like this life in the sorority very much during the war years, which is where she was living in a sorority. So she'd rappel out her bedroom window and go rock climbing. And she became a climber and a skier. And they met in Alta, Utah, just after the war ended. She was a waitress at the Alta Lodge, and he walked in, and the stories of those days are really fun. So I won't go into it in long detail, but they ended up in Aspen because my grandmother, who was a teacher at DU, a psychologist and doctor of psychology, had been to the Goethe Bicentennial in 1949 because her hero, Albert Schweitzer, had come. And she was Swiss, and she could help with translation and communication, so she kind of helped out a little bit and followed him up here. And shortly after that, Walter Pepke offered her a job. And here's the first woman in the psychology department as a professor at DU, having her credentials and her career starting. I was offered this job by Walter Pepke, but he came to offer her a job running a hotel for him in his new his new cultural center, Aspen. And so she turned that down because she couldn't imagine running a hotel while she had this blooming career. But she told my parents that they would have her blessing if they would move to Aspen. She knew they were skiers and that's what their lives were about. She said the only place with a future, 1949, was Aspen. Turns out she was right, and they moved up here in 1950, and he was a ski instructor. He helped build the #1 chairlift earlier on in 1946-7. He helped construct it as a mechanic, turning wrenches. And they started a ski lodge, built things up. He built several lodges and several houses here in the time that he was here. And so that's how our family ended up here. And,
That's fascinating.
And it's kind of fun.
I didn't know that
It's
story.
kind of fun. So when I'm puffing up, I brag that I'm a product of the Aspen idea, for better or worse.
There you go. This is the personification.
Yeah,
of
here you go, people.
Aspen idea.
In 3D.
But then how did you manage to stay here, let's say?
Well, I grew up in Aspen, graduated Aspen High School in 1977, went to CU Boulder with no thought that I would be coming back to Aspen. It just, one, it didn't seem affordable, and two, it seemed out of reach. And I had a convoluted path through the University of Colorado. I was studying engineering and business to begin with. And I went through the entire engineering program, but along the way I discovered filmmaking. And I actually received my engineering training exam certificate after completing as a civil engineer. And I went to one job interview, and in the middle of the interview I had this epiphany that there's just no way it wasn't for me. And the engineering. The gentleman interviewing me got up to answer a phone call or something, and I bolted. I'm not proud of it, but I guess I should say it. I just panicked. This is not my life. I was down in an industrial part of Denver in a dimly lit, fluorescently lit building. And here I was a kid from Aspen and a skier.
Tubes of drawings.
Right. Yeah. And I had this panic attack, and so I became a filmmaker because I had a parallel track studying filmmaking. And it turns out at that era, Aspen was the epicenter in the country for adventure filmmaking, wildlife filmmaking, expedition filmmaking, documentaries. And so I came back and just started working my way into the film world. And I had some experience. I'd studied audio recording at the Aspen Music Festival. So a summer in the Audio Recording Institute there gave me enough chops that I could talk my way onto a crew. And so I became a sound man, which was making me good money. And I came back to Aspen and found work. And so I traveled the world from Aspen making documentaries for many years, and went from a sound man to an assistant cameraman to a cameraman to a director cameraman to a producer, and had a fantastic 30-year run, and was able to stay here. I was able to buy my parents' house from them So I was their retirement. I had a 30-year mortgage and kept them going, and they stayed in the valley for, my mom is still in the valley. She's in Elgibel, and everybody's doing great.
That's
So I'm
wonderful.
still here. I'm incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
I think luck is more important than brains or just about anything else, I got to tell you.
Well, and then you ran for county commissioner. Why at the beginning?
Well, it was suggested to me. It was actually a client of mine who will go unnamed presently, but I made a film for them, and they said, God, we love the film. This is great, but we have this idea. You should run for commissioner. And I thought, wow, that's the biggest insult I've ever received. You just told me you loved this piece of art I've delivered to you, and you've just suggested I change careers. But quite honestly, my business and the film business has changed dramatically. Television, the calls weren't coming in. The nature of the industry has changed. The competition got better. There are a lot of really young, talented guys coming up. Because I was skiing with cameras backwards. I was hauling heavy things up and down mountains. I was running rivers. I was, doing all this stuff. And it's kind of a young man's game. So you reach a point, you're in your 40s or 50s, and you start looking over your shoulder and seeing really talented people with more energy, working for less, willing to come up behind you. I thought, well, maybe it's time to step to the next iceberg, and that was this.
Yeah.
But I think also the reason I decided to run is because I do love the community. I grew up here. I've seen the changes. I've known the people. I think I have a pretty good understanding of our community and how it works. I know the underbelly as well as the beautiful stuff everybody promotes. And it occurred to me I might be able to help out and maintain what we have here that's so special. And I've said it so many times, it seems like a canned response, but it's still true.
Well, what has it been like being a county commissioner now that you've got 4 years of it?
Well, this is fun. I think you'll appreciate this because you were a county manager for a number of years, right? So
Right.
You know more about a lot of the inner workings still than I probably do
I've
yet.
forgotten most of it.
Yeah, I can understand that too. The first term you're in, honestly, there's a lot of confusion because you're not quite sure what your role is and how you stand in there. And even though I'd have tons and tons of meetings with this county manager who I really respect and the county attorney who I really respect, all this great staff with a lot of institutional knowledge, it's still hard to get a grip on, what is my job here? Am I supposed to be coming up with ideas, or am I supposed to be helping direct policy based on ideas that are brought to me? How do I communicate with my bosses, which are the community, and how do I transmit that to the other commissioners and the staff? And those are interesting questions, and I don't have all the pat answers to them. And so in the first term, probably about 6 months in or so, or a year in, I was asking John Peacock, our county manager, I said, how am I doing? Do you think I'm ever going to get the hang of this? Because it feels like a mismatch. And he said, give it another 6 months, you'll be fine. 6 months later, I went back to him and asked the same question and got the same response. So that's our joke. And
Yeah.
haven't played a round of it lately, but it's like, I think 4 years in, I'm beginning to understand how things work.
Yeah.
And it's possible that I'm a slow learner, but it's also a very complex. It's a very complex thing. And there are so many different ways you can approach it. And I think I have my own way of approaching it, which has been working so far.
What would that way be?
Well,
The Poschman way.
Reaching a consensus with everyone isn't always easy. So when you first arrive, and you're sitting next to Rachel Richards, who's been here for so long and has such an amazing institutional knowledge as a commissioner and a mayor and a councilman. And Patty Clapper, who's been here, this is her 5th term probably, I think, and she's been here so long. And George Newman, strong personality with a strong vision, and Steve Child, who has incredible institutional knowledge as well, having been in the community so long. And thinking, wow, how am I going to convince these people of anything, and how do I go about doing it, and do I really need to convince them of anything, or do I just want to try to push, say what I think and go on. And honestly, my first response in my first term, for better or worse, was if it requires a consensus from the other commissioners, if I need them and I need the staff to weigh on something, then yes, I have to go through the process with them. But if I see something that I can accomplish that is a valuable, worthwhile, and somewhat benign politically thing for the community, something everyone would be in support of, for instance, and I can do that on my own using the little clout you have as a commissioner, then I'm going to do that. So I do have personal projects. And the first significant one, there have been a few, the first significant one was one of the very first meetings we had. An ask came in from the psychiatric hospital in Grand Junction. West Springs Hospital was doing a renovation, I think a $34 million renovation. And they came to us and said, we've raised everything we need. We only need $4 million left to go. Your community being one of our major sources of patients, we'd love you to help out. Can you give us $100,000? And I thought, okay, they've got a $34 million budget. They're $4 million from reaching it. They're asking us for 100, and a little light went off. So I said, why so little? This is Aspen in Pitkin County, right? And then, to my surprise and a little bit of dismay, the board, had this conversation, decided to give them half of what they asked for, which might be really prudent and is probably a good policy. But for me, it was like, okay, we're giving them $50,000. That's a rounding error on what they're trying to do here. And it occurred to me, having dug into it a little bit, that we really have some issues with mental health issues on the Western Slope, and so I wanted to help. So I began my own campaign to help try to get them their final $4 million. And we managed to do it in about 11 months. And
The $4 million?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for all of that, but I think I had a personal hand in just using my network of people and contacts to help create some momentum, challenge grants and things like that, to raise. I probably helped raise $1.9 million or something like that, or $1.7 million, which I could point to as people who networked through me who ended up helping out. And so we got it done. I thought, well, okay, this didn't require the county's participation, but it's something I could do for the community that makes me feel good, because as a commissioner, I'm not feeling entirely confident yet of what I can accomplish and how I can help the community. So it's like, also as an entrepreneur, I've always worked for myself. I've always worked as a freelancer or a contract player. It seemed to me that I wanted to apply some of my entrepreneurial skills and production skills to try to get things done, because one of the things you notice when you enter a government bureaucracy is that things go a lot slower. The public process, out of necessity, is a slow, plodding process full of potholes and traps, and you never know if you're going to get through it. Look at the various things we're in now, the airport and land use codes and building codes and all this stuff. It's just this long, tedious process. And as an impatient person from the community with some entrepreneurial and ambitions in those regards, it's like, dang, I just want to get something accomplished here. So this gives me an avenue. Those sort of projects give me an avenue to try to say, yes, I actually did make something happen, and I'll hang my hat on that.
Did you get the county to up its $50,000?
No, and didn't ask them.
Yeah.
But what's come as a result is Mine Springs Health and West Springs Hospital, I think, have been more responsive in our community and more involved than perhaps they were before we had that effort. So I think they're paying a lot more attention to us now, which is good, and they're being very, very helpful and useful in our community with our response on mental health issues, and whether it's the suicide epidemic. We have a national baseline suicide rate is is up about 2 or 3 times what it would normally be during the pandemic because there's so much uncertainty as it goes up during recessions. And then you have things like the fires, forest fires, climate change, climate anxiety. These are things that actually cause severe problems for people. And so I'm so grateful that we have Mind Springs and the other groups, Aspen Hope Center for one, Aspen Strong, amazing groups of people who are doing great things. So I think I've contributed in a way where they're enriching the community perhaps a little bit more, or maybe we're all more engaged and more involved as a result of those efforts.
You know, it's fascinating because that is part of then the county is a part of this much larger network that creates a continuity of care, a whole care system.
Right, a continuum of care.
And it works in the mental health arena, but it also works in other parts, you know, whether it be transportation or planning, that sort of thing. And I think, I'm curious, coming in as a freshman county commissioner, if you will, where you're thinking, what is my role? How much of that was kind of a surprise or was it something you expected?
That
this
our
is
community
an inarticulate question about the learning about the whole complex system.
Oh, sure. Well, that the community
work.
extends beyond Pitkin County, there's no question. And I've been lucky enough to be involved. There are so many different organizations we can be part of, and I've been quite provincial in my choices of what I wanted to be involved in. So I'm on the RAFTA board. I'm the alternate, and I'll probably be the RAFTA member because George Newman's termed out, so he'll be off that board. But he chaired that board for a number of years and has been deeply involved. And I'm kind of lined up to step in, unless the board thinks otherwise, when we start choosing our our positions. But RAFTA being one. Talk about an amazing organization that's a cooperation of several municipalities and counties, and the issues that they have, the challenges. That's an interesting one, just to talk about RAFTA for a minute. The pandemic has caused an interesting situation. Their workforce demand has gone up. Their ridership has gone down to 1/3 capacity. They're still moving a lot of people, but it takes 3 times as many buses now to do it.
In a very expensive way.
It's because all of a sudden you could look at it as the efficiency of our bus system has just gone down by 2/3. We're running at 1/3 efficiency. So when you see the rush hour now every day on Highway 82, all the single car passengers, because that's the safest way to get yourself to work during a pandemic, all of a sudden we're back to 1990s traffic levels, or maybe more. Seems like more. I don't remember the 90s being that bad, quite honestly. But we've got rush hour every bloody day now.
I certainly would guess it's more.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. Just talking about car trips across the Maroon Creek Bridge, it's always compared back to 1991. And so, boy, we've got some real problems there. And how we solve that, happily, RAFT is run by Dan Blankenship, who's been around as long, since you were here, right?
I worked with Dan.
And I have absolute confidence in his ability and his attentiveness to taking care of things. And we have great conversations. And the problem is I'll have my 3 a.m. debate with myself, and I'll send him an email while I'm thinking about it, and he'll respond, like immediately. Think, oh, damn it, I shouldn't do
He's
that.
up having the same debate.
I can't contact that guy anytime I have a whim because he'll respond. It's like he has the work ethic and the attentiveness to his RAFTA machine that he's running, that he responds so quickly. So I have to be very careful. It's like, boy, I don't want to take any more of this guy's time than I need to, because I can see he's just on it all the time. But anyway, we're in good hands with RAFTA.
Oh yeah.
But it's kind of scary to think our efficiencies drop so dramatically, especially when it comes to energy and pollution and highway transportation, traffic. All those things tie into it. So that was just the RAFTA riff, but all these things tie together. That's one example. The other example maybe of communities, reaching out and working with others would be, I'm on the Rudai Water and Power Authority board. And it's not as active and as essential as RAFT would be. A lot of people don't know about us. but we are a board of elected officials from the region, Eagle. Garfield County isn't a part of it. They're kind of the outliers in that one, but Glenwood Springs, Basalt, Carbondale, Aspen, Snowmass Village, and Pitkin are on the RWAPA board, and our biggest challenge is working together to, one, allocate water that's called from Haughey to the various shareholders in Haughey. But then the biggest issue, honestly, has been the aquatic nuisance species, which have not invaded Haughey yet, but every year we hold the record for interdictions of mussel-laden boats. The aquatic nuisance species are zebra or quagga mussels, often coming from Lake Powell or Havasu or other lakes and reservoirs in our region that are now infested. And thankfully, we've got this amazing director of RWAPA, April Long, is our director, and she's got a team that stops boats and inspects them and then power washes them before they can even go in the reservoir. And that's kind of an expensive and convoluted program, but we've managed to keep Haughey clear of water, which means the hydropower plant doesn't get clogged up, because the first thing that happens is the mussels attach to ropes and tanks and inlets and pipes, and they clog everything up. So they could take out a hydropower station of our size, and we've avoided that so far. And that hydropower is Aspen's claim to energy self-sufficiency and renewable energy. If that went down, our mix as a renewable energy center would change dramatically. That was a long answer. What was the question?
Well, learning about the complexity of.
Did I tell you my motto is brevity is the soul of wit?
Now I'm derailed.
Good. That was the first thing they taught me in the CIA school, was to throw the interviewer off balance.
Yes. Well done. So, and you know, has it been fun being a county commissioner?
You know, it was hard hard for me to answer that in the positive the first year or two. No, it wasn't fun. It's much more fun now, and it's fun when it becomes. It's fun when you get to know your other commissioners well, and you know the staff well, and how everything works. You know the personal relationships, and you know the roles, and you understand your role, and you understand the goal of reaching consensus, which we all share. Is that ideally our board probably votes with consensus on, I'm going to say 90%, if not more, of the issues that come before us. So once you understand that, then you can relax a little bit, and it does become more fun. There are times when we do things which really are a lot of fun. We do something that's really useful, positive for the community, and then it's fun. You think, wait a minute, we just made a good difference. We've made a huge difference for the community in one way or another. And so, yeah, then it becomes fun. But no, it's not fun all the time. You get used to the volumes. Like, there are times when the weekly packet could be 1,800 pages long, and so you have to learn how to weed out what's important and get through the boilerplate and skip over what's already familiar. And there's a hell of a lot of reading. There's a lot of sitting on your butt, which you reach a certain age where that's really bad for you. So I try to get out and exercise every possible chance I get. The COVID pandemic causing us to use Zoom more than usual has been interesting, because we've just eliminated our commute time, so we actually have a bit more free time to either prepare or go for a walk before the long meeting or between meetings. But is it fun? Yeah, there are times when it's fun.
And it changed, it became fun when it became more of a known process?
Right. When I became more comfortable, more confident and comfortable. You know, I have to say, I think that in this certain condition, like, I think the next 4 years are going to be tougher than the last. And that's where I'm really grateful I've got 4 years under my belt. I'm grateful that most of the other commissioners have a lot of experience now, because I wouldn't want to have stumbled into this as a neophyte when we're facing some pretty interesting and tough things. Because when you first come in, you've got a lot of opinions, and you're going to make all this stuff happen, and you've got ideas, and it does. You'll find very quickly that it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I thought when you get elected, you could issue edicts, and everyone would do what you say, and that just hasn't been the truth.
It doesn't work that way?
It doesn't work that way. I also thought it was going to be, fast cars and fast women once I had this stature, and it's really just fast food.
Well, what do you think is on the future, in the future with this change? I mean, as you
With the pandemic?
well, and
or
just
with
in
the
general,
economy?
that there's been a wrench thrown in the works.
Yeah.
And-
God,
and-
which wrench
but-
are we talking about?
But there are still ongoing processes, ongoing things that
Right.
people want to do. The airport's still an issue. The
Right. Airport's
planning is still an
ongoing.
issue. Traffic is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here, by the way, here's this wrench of economic disruption.
We've got the economic disruption on one hand, yet we've just come out of probably the most active and lucrative real estate sales turnover in history, probably for any community. I think $1.5 billion in transactions in. Was it just this summer alone, or was it? I don't know if it was
It's
the
some
second
outrageous
quarter.
number that I
Yeah.
can't get my head around.
It's $1.5 billion. And so we've got this incredible environment where you have vast amounts of wealth flowing into the community and out. And meanwhile, our budget's changed dramatically. So we've spent a lot of money helping people with rent and food and mortgage payments in this last pandemic. So I'm not sure I've forgotten where your question went, but
Well,
the
it probably wasn't very
contrasts
clear.
are fascinating.
In your second term,
Yeah.
now that you have your roller skates under you and you're
Yeah,
all
yeah.
set, that what do you think the county's really going to have to face? What are you looking at when you have your discussion at 3 a.m. with yourself about?
Right. Well, the part of it
money?
is having been brought up here and having lived here and as most of my adult life in Aspen and in Pitkin County, I feel as if I have a sense of the culture of the place, and we've always been a community that was really found nature and open space and wildlife and wildlands and a certain mountain lifestyle to be important to us. We've got the cultural and intellectual life that came with the Aspen Institute and the Music Festival and the Physics Center and all these things that have created this incredibly culturally rich place. And naturally that attracted a lot of people with discretionary income that could enjoy it. But somehow it seems to me that our culture is shifting, and it's shifted a lot. Now, we have a real estate economy that dwarfs our ski economy, near as I can tell, and our hotel economy. The tourism is second fiddle now to this exchange of money, I think, and the ski industry certainly is second fiddle, and that changes things dramatically. All of a sudden, you have people with a lot at stake. They've got a lot invested. They might be in up to their nose, and they need to keep making that money and keeping it all going. And if you have, well, we've got a huge real estate industry here. I don't know how many realtors and employees of real estate industries and property management and construction, all that are associated, but it's a huge part of our community now. And I'm concerned because it seems that we're having a cultural shift. And you probably had people making the same argument in the 90s. I'm sure you did, because it's been happening a long time. But I'm wondering now if people come here because they can make money, moreover coming here for a lifestyle and an aspiration to something greater culturally. And having grown up with the Aspen idea, it's always been about, cultural influences from around the world and big thoughts. And it's not about, believe it or not, I never thought it was about consuming more, although we do have some opulence here and there's a lot of consumption. It just didn't seem to me that was it culturally. But now I'm not so sure, I have to say. When I'm feeling cynical, I wonder if we've just become another commodity to be exchanged at high prices. And, you know, I fear for the easy life in Aspen where it wasn't about money.
Can the county address that somehow? Is that something the county can, you know,
Can we or should we?
yeah.
Well,
as someone who was involved when the idea of limiting house size first came up, it was always described as social engineering.
sure.
You know, and
Yeah.
trying to keep a certain, it was connected to a certain type of person out of the community and trying to attract a different
Right, right,
kind of person. It wasn't just an energy argument.
right.
And so that in its own kind of primitive caveman way of in the 80s and 90s, that's how that was kind of playing out.
Right,
I
right.
don't know whether that's alive
Well,
now or not.
I think it is now. Now you have the conversations about equity and what does that mean? You know, what's fair to everyone? You have the bigger conversation now than we had then, although it existed, was the employee housing, affordable housing, so that our workers can be in the community they live in and work in. So the issues are still there, but some of the elements have changed. Climate change puts a lens. You can look at everything through a lens of climate change. It's so easy to forget in this paradise we live in until the smoke and the fires, you know, suffocate us. It's easy to ignore all that that's going on in the world, but yet it's a problem. It's happening. We're measuring it as it's coming. It's going to change our lives. And so I think we need to be aware of that because it's what affects our community, whether it's our infrastructure or just perhaps it's the way of life. I think who can make a difference, whether we can try to work on equity issues or climate issues. If the rain-snow line is moving up rapidly, it's going to affect our economy dramatically and our tourism dramatically. We might all be doing our cross-country skiing up on Richmond Ridge in the next 20 years because that's where the snow will be. So are we preparing for that? And are we going to be, hopefully there are people in the community looking forward and trying to set policies that will help us prepare for that, if nothing else. And you can apply that across the board to housing, transit, crowding, growth, all those issues.
It seems so daunting.
It does. You know, if I wasn't heavily sedated, this would be really, really tough on me. Just kidding.
I know.
I just love that line.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'm glad you're running. I'm glad you're looking forward to a second term.
Yeah, thank you.
And I agree with, it takes a while to kind of figure out the levers and what the role is. And Pitkin County is unique because it's a home rule charter county with essentially a council manager form.
Right.
And I think a lot of folks expect commissioners to get in there and like run their district.
Right, right. We're different that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Comparing again to the other communities in the other counties in the state that have 3 commissioners and who knows if they have a manager or much of a staff. Maybe they have a road crew and they're doing the essential work. Some people say, well, why aren't you guys just doing roads, you know, the basics to keep things going? It's like, yeah, we're doing that, but there's more to it also.
And how have you found the role to be developed, or how has it worked out as a county commissioner? What is the role of a county commissioner?
Wow. Here, quite honestly, the answer that I'll give you that I have to keep reminding myself is that we are, policy questions are brought to us. How are we going to approach we're not going to solve a particular problem or a facet of a problem. We're not going to go fix the tire on the road grader or the dump truck, but hopefully we're going to have a policy which puts the mechanism in place to make all that run smoothly. So the decisions we have are policy decisions. They're not, let's get in and fix this. And that's hard, coming in from the real world. The first thing you want to do is roll up your sleeves and get something done, so you can say, hey, I'm worthy of the salary you're paying me, and I'm worthy of the position you've bestowed on me and the trust you put in me. When really it comes down to, what do you think? It's more, well, on a policy level, sometimes it's hard to tell just what's happening and how things are decided, and there's more of an amorphous, ephemeral nature to it, as I understand it. And I still have to have conversations every now and then with our attorney, for instance, to say, hey, this is how I feel. If my feelings intrude into this, is it a problem? For a decision on something, regarding land use or regarding something that's sensitive and has litigious nature about it, where do I stand? And happily, we have people who can advise us to say, well, here's really what your role is.
Right.
And there's some comfort in that. I can say that. No, it's not at all what I anticipated. I was misinformed.
You were duped into running for county commissioner.
Yeah, and then here he's doing it again. So fool me once.
Well, you did say you were a fatalist. As long as you're here, you might as well do it again. But it does. I always felt, interjecting my opinion, that county commissioners are representatives of the community.
Right.
And my attitude was that we all worked for the community, and here the commissioners are the representatives that the community has sent us.
Right.
So we have to work very closely with
Sure.
the commissioners to get the pulse of what the community wants us to do.
Thank you for saying that. I wish I could say it so articulately. That's right on. Our bosses are the community. We are responsive to them. Sometimes there's interesting conflicts because you could easily, and our staff has been accused of driving the ship, and it's like, well, they actually do drive they're making the stuff happen based on the policies we set. But we all have to remember who works for who. Mm-hmm. And occasionally there are times when I think, well, wait a minute, maybe that was the commissioner's decision rather than the staffer who brought it forward. And then you have to be aware of how is this being presented to us, whether it's coming from the community, whether it's coming from an attorney representing someone, or it's coming from our own staff. How is it being presented? If there's any bias, can we see it? Will we be able to see through it? And that's part of the process. And that's the nice thing about the lengthy plotting processes is that stuff all comes to the surface. Yeah. Recent examples are perfect examples of that, where we begin a process, but it wasn't enough. Didn't go quite right. And I'm thinking about land use. House size is the big. That caused a lot of upset in the community, just because people. We had a 9-week process, public process, with participation from members of the community, but not everyone heard about it. And when they heard about what they thought might be at stake, it caused a lot of angst in the community. And so people are coming forward saying, wait a minute, I've never heard about this. You guys are doing something in secret. I had an attorney call me and say, you guys are doing secret meetings about changing the house sizes. And I said, there's nothing secret here, but clearly the community has not engaged yet. So we're going to go back, we're going to re-engage, we're going to look at all the aspects of this, and we're going to learn a lot more. And I think every commissioner will say it, is that, there's a lot to learn here. We have to tread lightly. People's lives and livelihoods and incomes are at stake. Investments, life's fortune. I live in a 40-year-old house, and as do some of the many people who have written us letters. It's like, what happens to me if I can't do anything with my house? Right. And it's ready to fall down, but I dare not, renovate it, or it's no longer worth what I paid, or things like that. So all I can say is stay tuned. That's the beauty of the long, plodding, tedious process, is all this comes to the surface, and we usually end up with a pretty good decision at the end.
Great. We're out of time.
Thank God.
I appreciate you putting up with us for 45 minutes.
Oh, I enjoyed that.
And this concludes another episode of Probeline, where we've gotten to know Greg Poschman a little bit better. And we hope that it was enjoyable and informative for you as well.
I did want you to ask me what my slogan was going to be.
What's your slogan going to be?
You have no choice. And I regret having that as a slogan. I honestly say I don't think the process is served by only having a one candidate for an election, I have to say.
Take it as a compliment.
I will. Thank you.